Hey everybody, welcome back to the basement. Welcome back to the channel and the layout. Today we are going to be checking out a new product. This was just delivered here in May of 2024 from Atlas. It is the Premier E8s. And now Premier meaning these are ex-MTH toolings, but these locomotives are fantastic. They were announced in April of 2023, and about a year later they've arrived here in the United States, and these are great models. This is a 3-row model. I picked this up from Train World the other day, ordered it on Friday, and it was here at my house by noon on Saturday. You can't knock the shipping from Train World. It's the best. But these are really nice locomotives, and I got this because I've got the 21-inch passenger cars that Lionel produced back when the GG1s came out. I also have some Penn Central baggage cars and a ex-Weaver tooling Bradley car as well to go along with this really unique looking consist of passenger cars. And so I wanted another locomotive to pull them, and so that's why I picked up this E8. Now, we're going to be doing some work in this video. We're not just going to be doing a review, an overview of this locomotive, but we're going to actually be customizing it a little bit more and making it a little bit more Penn-centric. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a closer look at it before we make any changes, and then we're going to talk about what we're going to do with this locomotive that will make it something that I like for my layout, my collection, and it might not be something that other people like. Probably will depreciate the value of the locomotive a little bit, but I think it's going to make it look a lot cooler as it runs around my layout and hangs out in my collection. So let's go ahead and check out this brand new model from Atlas. All right, so here we are. This is a great locomotive. It can operate on 031 curves because, again, it does not have fixed pilots there. They're attached to the trucks. But so this can run on really small layouts, but it is kind of a longer diesel locomotive. Now, the E8s, you know, I've got a number of E8s in my collection. We've talked about them before, specifically with the New York Central, those Century Greens. I believe we talked a little bit about the history of the E8s there. I've got the Union Pacific E89s. I've got the Conrail OCS set that is actually another E unit as well. So we're not going to talk too much about the history of the E unit, but let's talk about this model. It is a plastic body, but die-cast side trucks, pilots, and fuel tank as well. There is a metal chassis. It does have some separately applied details. Now, diesels don't have as many separately applied details as our steam locomotives do, but we do have some handrails there. Our doors swing and do open up. We've got hand-painted crew figures inside the cab. On the roof of this locomotive, we've got some add-on detailing, including horn, and then the horn placement is going to be some of those road-specific details as well. We've got a door halfway through that also opens up as well, which is nice. And then on the underside of this locomotive, you see we've got a pickup roller on each truck. You know, only one pickup roller. Typically, we'd see two on Lionel models. Atlas, MTH only put one on. But we do have two powered trucks. You'll notice the inside wheel on these trucks is not flanged. That allows these 3-axle trucks to get around 031 curves. But when it's sitting down there on the track, you really don't notice that all that much. Now, this model does feature DCS, so you can run it with the DCS Wi-Fi app, or if you have a DCS remote. You could also run it conventionally or with DCC if you wanted to convert it to 2-rail. The controls are actually underneath this back door. This just pops down and open like that, and if you come around the side here, you'll see we've got your motor directions, your headlight directions, and then DCS or DCC options there. And then at the top, there's two ways to adjust some of the output volume and so forth. So that pops up there. Typically what we would see is this roof hatch here opening up, but it does not on this locomotive. We do have fan-driven smoke, comes out of these two exhaust ports here. So you can just fill in either one. The front, I believe it's the front one, is actually a straight shot. I think one of them straight, one of them has the bend to it. So you can, if you have a needle point, you can figure out which one is directly above the smoke unit to make filling that a little bit easier. Now, this is a single E unit, right? So it's not an AA pair, single E unit. So we're always going to be pulling our train with it coupled in the back, and this will be moving forward. So what does that tell me when I'm looking at what I want to do with this locomotive? I don't need that big lobster claw there at the front of the model. We can go ahead and get rid of that and swap that out for a Katy or a scale coupler for the front. I think that will just look a little bit nicer. So that's going to be one of the first things that we do. Now, if we turn this over, Atlas does provide the screw holes. See if I can get you to see the light shining through right there for your Katy couplers, which is really, really convenient. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take off the electro coupler on the front because we're not going to need it. And we'll put a scale coupler on there as well. The other thing that we're going to do is we really never saw these in real world that clean after they were delivered. Now, obviously they came out of the shop and they were that clean. That didn't last all that long. And so Penn Central, kind of like the end of the Pennsy as well, didn't do a whole lot to clean their locomotives. These things would get rusted out. In fact, there's one that looks like it was shot with a cannonball in the front with a huge hole in the nose. So what we're going to do is do some weathering on this locomotive. And I don't want to overdo it, but we are going to add some grime, especially to this nice shiny plate. We're going to add some dirt and so forth to the trucks and these white logos, just make it look as though it's been used and it's more of an authentic Penn Central locomotive. So Katy coupler, a little bit of weathering is what we're going to do to this to customize it and make it my own. And again, the passenger cars that I have are not weathered. I don't plan on weathering those. So maybe you say, well, you weather the locomotive and you don't weather the passenger cars. It's my layout, my taste. This is what I want to do. So I think it's going to look pretty neat when it's all said and done. So I've got my cradle here. And what we can do is pick this locomotive up. We're going to turn it over here. And then what I'll do is bring you guys up here too. So the first thing we need to do is get this coupler off. Now this is an electro coupler, so you can see it's wired up there. So we'll have to disconnect those pieces as well. And to get this off, we have to pop this spring piece off. There's a little C-clip there. So we're going to pop that off and we'll remove this coupler. And then we will go ahead and mount our Katy coupler on there as well and make sure the height is where we want it to be. Once we get that mounted, we can then take it back. We'll get it masked up and ready for weathering. All right, so we're in the back here. So we take that C-clip off and that spring and washer are going to come off right here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to flip this upside down because this bar, we need to get that bar out of there. That's what's holding that coupler in place. So to do that, we're going to have to take the pilot off. And to access the screws for that, we have to flip it upside down and then we can see those screws. So 4 screws, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and you can pop the shell off of this. And the only one wire there that's connecting, and that's for the LED lights here. The number boards are actually lit by these LEDs that are actually mounted to the body. So that reduces the amount of wires that have to go into the shell, which is nice. You can see the crew figures there in the cab. We've got, just molded in details there, and then our backstop. So, while this is off, you could add some more details to the cab interior if you wanted to. Coming around through here, got your first motor, and then your smoke is here. If we come up, you'll see that front fill hole is directly above the funnel for the smoke unit. The other one is not. So it comes into this compartment, comes over, and then goes into there. So that's why fill from the top, the first one, it's going to go right into the smoke box or into the smoke unit there. You can see where the board sits. And then we've got our rear motor, tack strip there. And then there's our controls at the back of the locomotive. So pretty clean. All right, so we're able to get the pilot off. By removing the shell, you could actually access these screws. Now that holds the wire harness for this coupler in place. Now, I can get that. We're going to cut these wires because we're not going to need them. And then what we'll do is seal them back up so that they don't short anything. Then we can remove this coupler piece. All right, so we've got that out. And I've pulled back the wires for the the electro coupler here. And I just want to tie them off on this wire harness here so that they stay out of the way and don't bump into anything that they're not supposed to. So we'll just tighten that up there. Little snip. All right. Now the pilot's back on. We can actually put the shell back on, and then we can do the KD mount. What we can see here is there's actually some of the paint rubbed off on that pilot from where that coupler was sitting. So I put everything in a bowl. All the parts go into like a Pyrex bowl. So this was sitting like this, but that underside of this is metal. It was rubbing on there, and look at that paint. That's probably on everybody's E-unit probably has that happening because of how that design is. But that's okay. This pilot's going to look worn when we weather it anyway, so I'm not overly concerned. Now I'm going to put the shell back on so it protects all of these electronic parts. Before I do that, I have to reattach our wire harness there. So we're going to get that reattached and get this screwed back on. We're going to use these 805s. These are the ones that I use. I just kind of got a big box of them over here with all sorts of other parts and things like that that you need for installing these. I just bought a bunch at one time from Trains with a Z. And so we're going to go ahead and put these on. Now usually you'll have like the mounting pads and things like that, but you can see here we've already got pre-drilled holes there for these couplers. So we should be just about good to go. So inside this little envelope that these KDs come in, you get this little set of directions here that kind of explain what you have to do. But then inside you get a pair of coupler sets. So you get one for the front and the rear of the car or the locomotive that you're using. So we've got our coupler here. We've got the plate and then the coupler box as well. And then there's going to be some really small screws, or excuse me, springs, here we go, that are in this as well. Now, I will tell you, they give you some extra springs because these things are very, very easy to lose. You know, if you put them under any sort of tension and then they happen to lose grip on them, they're going to spring somewhere and you are never going to find them. They're super, super tiny. So I'm going to go ahead and put the spares back into the envelope here since I'm only using one coupler for the front of this locomotive. And then what we're going to do is set these down and going to go ahead and try to get this set up. So I've got my coupler, the screw, the box, and then the plate. And then I've got a thing of screws here that I picked up on Amazon, just different lengths of screw. And then there's some nuts there as well. Now those for the most part, we're not going to need today. And then I also picked up a threading kit from KD. You can order these all from KD to get exactly what you need, but we're not going to need that today because Atlas has those pre-drilled holes in the pilot of this locomotive, which is going to make our life really, really easy. So what we need to do now that we've got all this stuff set up is put the spring into the box. Now, one thing you're going to need also is a height tester. So that's what this is here. Again, purchased from Katie. You set this on the track and we're going to model that later for you. That makes sure that your coupler is at the right height. So this is kind of how the box goes. Coupler sits in there. And then what we want to make sure is that there's going to be a spring behind that coupler as well that kind of holds it, pulls it back into the box. And that plate sits on top as well. Now we want to make sure we get it on the correct way. And I'm going to show you that here in a minute. But when we install these, you're installing it typically upside down on the engine or the car. You want to make sure that the coupler is correct. It's facing the right way and that it's not upside down. So when you flip the engine over, it's the wrong way. So just something to be mindful of as you're working through some of these things. So what we need to do is set the coupler into this box just like this. You'll see there's a little post there and the spring is going to go right back there behind that post, and it's going to help keep the coupler against the back of that box. So we're going to go ahead and grab that piece there and pull that in, and then we'll be good to go. So once that spring's in place, I'm going to use the screwdriver here just to get it where it needs to go so that it is nice and tight against that post and seated in there. We put this plate on top, and then by holding it carefully so we don't lose the spring, you can see that pulls the coupler right back. You can go ahead and slide it in to kind of test fit where that's going to go in the locomotive. We're just going to put these screws in here. Sorry for the shadows and the lack of focus there. But I did just reset some different screws to make them a little bit longer. Now, these are pre-threaded holes in the pilot. So just need to make sure you get the screws to the right length. And we're going to screw them in nice and tight. There we go. And that box is not going anywhere. Now we can go test the height to make sure that this is proper. So here is my height gauge, just fits on the outside of the rails and sits down on top of the track like that. And we can see it is about 1/2 centimeter or so too short. So, and by too short, I guess the coupler on the locomotive is too high, which means we need to bring it down, which means I'm gonna have to shim it with some Plastruct. Now you can 3D print some parts. I know that Norm Charbonneau, he 3D prints his Katie pads to get them at the right height, because you can just 3D print them at different thicknesses. I'm going to just use some Plastruct because that's what I have. Now the Plastruct that I have is white, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check the height here against some of the pieces of Plastruct that I have by laying the Plastruct on the height gauge and just seeing if it gets me up to the top of the coupler on the locomotive. And then I'm going to take it outside, hit it with some black spray paint, and then we'll go ahead and pre-drill some holes and remount the coupler with the Plastruct in place. All right, so we've added some shims, and look at that. It's a perfect fit. So what we did was, again, I took some Plastruct and shimmed it down, and then I painted it black so you can kind of see that shim just above the coupler box there. Slide that out of the way. Bring this around. You can see it there, but it was white Plastruct, I spray painted it black. And then if you look underneath, you can see the screws. There, it's got that in place. So that is done. Now, I think the front end of this thing looks a little bit more prototypical. If you zoom out a little bit, of course, there's comments are gonna come in that, oh, it's still on 3 rails. That's true, but it's better than it was, which is what we're looking for. We're looking for things that are gonna be steps in the right direction. Now, when this is sitting flat on the track and we're looking at it from this level, notice this gap here? That's kind of what I was possibly alluding to in the video earlier, if I don't edit it out, of trying to put something in there to fill that space in. And really what we can do is, again, taking some black strips of Plastruct just along the sides. But again, you don't want it to look janky either. So for now, I'm just gonna let that go. But we've got that front cleaned up. So now we can go ahead and begin our weathering. And again, I just looked at some photos of E-units online, and they're all pretty grinded up. So we're not going to overdo this one, just some light dirt and maybe some rust on the pilot, certainly on the coupler there, and then some streaking from this plate. Those didn't last and be all that shiny all that long. So we'll put some black grime on there. We're on the exhaust as well, some dirt down low, and that'll be that. So let's go to the back and start weathering. So first thing we need to do is mask up these windows. All right, so, and the headlight. So we're gonna mask the headlight, the windows, everything else we're gonna leave wide open. And the reason I don't mask the number boards or anything like that is they would also get dirty, right? So if there's a little bit of dirt over top of that, that's okay. And these, marker lights, these are easy to clean with a little bit of alcohol and a Q-tip. You can actually clean the paint right off, so no need to be masking those either. We just have to be mindful of our windshield wipers there as we're going about doing this. But again, just a light mask, it doesn't have to be perfect. What I use for that is just a blue painter's tape. So I'm gonna take my board here, I'm gonna lay it out, and then I just use a hobby knife to cut this tape to the size that I think it is, and then we just trial and error it until I get the right fit. So if we're going to do the front windows here, use my knife to measure really, really roughly. You don't want to over mask because you don't want to have any spots that are going to be brightly colored, or not dirty. So I gotta get that into that frame. There we go. That's pretty good right there. When we begin to do our airbrushing, we've got our airbrush, we've got a cleaning container, we've got our thinner airbrush cleaner, and our paints ready to go here. And you want to do this in a well-ventilated area. I do this in my basement. I do have a vent hood over top of my workbench that helps pull the fumes away. I have a backstop that I'll show you here in a second. And then basically I just created a little lazy Susan for the locomotive to sit on with some track. that you can see here that can spin easily. That box prevents some overspray. And then I'm also wearing a respirator when I do this as well, just to really, keep those fumes out of my system. You really need to be careful when using spray paints or airbrushes or anything like that. So a respirator is something that really helps me. So we're going to be using some different paints here. I'm not going to use that varnish today, but I've got some dirt color, some burnt umber. We've got some gray black. Here's a dirt color that I like as well for the trucks, a light brown. There's that black gray model color. That's a nice one. Fully black paint, some white. We might not use that one today. And then just some other dirt and earth tones. Again, hit the trucks and pilots with. We've got a rust color as well. We're definitely going to be using that. Probably not the spray, but a little touch up and some fine detail areas here and there. We will use that for. So again, I'm going to use an airbrush today to do some of the weather. So when we start off with the weathering process for this engine, I'm starting off with that gray-black color. And, I can't really find a grimy black anymore. This is what suffices for me. So this model, brand new, it's got really shiny black paint. It's got this bright, shiny vent along the side. And that's just not what these look like when they were in service. They're going to have a lot of soot and grime and exhaust on them. Those shiny silver plates on the side, those vents, they're going to look uneven, grimy, dark, and nasty. And so I'm going to hit that here, just kind of going back and forth and hitting it from different angles because they're graded. So you gotta make sure you get the either side of the grate so the shiny metallic doesn't really come through. We're going to streak it a little bit up and down. That's always a good method. Gravity's going to be pulling some of that grime down along the side of the locomotive. So when you're looking at streaking of any kind, you want it to be vertical more than horizontal. And so we're going to hit it just a big once over with this gray black. We're going to hit the roof a lot too. Again, this is really going to help dull that black paint that just comes stock on this locomotive as if it's straight out of the factory. So we're going to hit the top with a pretty even coating of this gray and just kind of weather the paint a little bit and then add some more to the other side as well. Spinning this around, again, we're going to hit this side again with that gray black. You can see that shiny silver metallic vent. We're just going to come over it nice and slow, and then we're going to hit different spots to give it some uneven weathering and grime, just as we'd see in some of those prototypical photos that you can search Penn Central E8 on Google, and the images are going to come up with a bunch of these things that just look absolutely beat up and gross. So start to see some of those grimy vent spots start to pop up there. Now we're going to even that up a little bit as well as we go by and give it an overall gray black tone on this side as well, so it's even with the other side. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to hit this with some of the burnt umber and dirt tones. We're going to really center that around that front pilot shooting up at the locomotive. As they're traveling, and dirt's going to be coming up from the track and the surrounding area. It's going to be centered on the trucks, and then some after spray onto the body of the locomotive and the fuel tank and so forth. So trying to really come down level with the trucks, try not to shoot down on them, but shoot up from the ground, just as this dirt would kind of hit it. So try to pull some more light in by moving this box for you there. We're going to spin it around. We're going to have some dirt centered on the back of the locomotive as well, as it kind of gets there, kind of circulates between cars, and we get the wheels are going to kick some dirt up there. So we're going to hit that and then come back around here on this side and again, even this up. Now this is the first layer. We're going to do multiple layers of different hues of paints. We've got our earth tone, our burnt umber, which is going to be more of a darker brown, and just kind of hit it in some different spots, add some layers and different earth tones. And again, we're on the nose here. It's going to take the brunt of a lot of this dirt. And yeah, so we're just going to go around and give it a nice even paint on the lower part of the locomotive. I'm not going to throw dirt up on the roof. That's not really what we would see. So we're going to center this on the lower quarter of the locomotive. Now what I've done is I've added some of the rust color to my airbrush, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit the couplers. So look, I'm just giving this a once over here. We're going to take my fine paintbrush here, and we're just going to take some of the rust color, and I just have it kind of on a paper towel and then dab it off, so it's really not that much. And I'm just going to add some rust in just some various spots around the locomotive. Again, these Penn Central E8s were not taken care of once they came out into service, they weren't repainted or patched all that much. So, we're just going to add a little rust here to the back steps, on the ladder and so forth. And if, get a little bit too much, just go ahead and wipe it off there. But just in some various rivet spots and maybe on some of the vents, just really lightly. We're not going to overdo this because, sometimes I see people, they really can overdo the rust. And, they wouldn't let these things rust out while they were in operation. But they did start to accumulate some rust. And we don't want this thing to be at the end of service looking, so we're just going to hit it in some light spots. We're going to add some up here to the front, again, to the ladder and handrails where things would get dinged up and scratched. And then we'll go to the pilot as well, and we'll add some light streaking maybe to the pilot rust spots as well, because they're going to get dinged with rocks and anything else that's in its way. All right, and there we have it. So this thing's looking pretty good. What I'm going to do is hit it with a matte clear coat. And once that's done, we are all set. I'm actually not even going to use powders on this locomotive. I think this looks really, really good the way it is. So, we'll run it. And then what we might have to do is, after we run it a little bit, is just hit some of the wheel sets again with some of the dirt, just to make sure they're even, because I don't have this on rollers. And, unlike a Lionel locomotive that's free moving, these are not. So, we'll run it, and then we can bring it back if we see some, tiger striping on the wheel sets. We'll come back and hit it again. All right, so that's going to wrap this one up. This is a finished product. I'm really happy with how this turned out. So let's go ahead and enjoy it running around the layout. I know that this is kind of an eclectic taste and it's not for everyone, but I think it looks really good on this locomotive for me, and I'm glad to have it in my collection. Let me know what your thoughts are on this, and if you want to see more detailed how-to weathering or customization videos, sort of like this one. Thanks everybody for watching. Let's go ahead and run it around the layout.
Now arriving from Boston on track 1, train number 283, Manhattan. This stop is Westerly.